vision received was that of blood cells, traveling throughout the body, supplying the much-needed oxygen and other nutrients to the differing members of the body to fulfill their purpose. Once the blood cells are spent, they must return back to the heart to be refilled before being sent out again and fulfill their purpose.
Take a time out for a second.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions before we go through the whole thing, or
Right now, no. I'm just trying to take it all in. I don't know if the details of the IVF program is absolutely essential, but do share whatever you feel to share.
We went through it 3 different times. And
3 times?
3 different times, yeah.
22 each?
Yeah.
How long a time?
So...
Because you have to...
It's by month, per month. So basically it's they track your cycle, and it's a whole process. Then once this certain day hits, then you have to do this. Then once this day hits, it's just kind of like a process of events.
Because you have to retrieve the eggs at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so the injections will make you produce more eggs.
Yeah.
And they'll go in and retrieve as many as they can get.
Because they have to figure out which one's going to be viable.
And then they have to, take... sperm and try and fertilize.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then out of that, they see which ones create embryos. And then out of that, they see which ones are viable. Mm-hmm. So you want a lot of eggs to have multiple options to create multiple embryos, essentially. So you have better
odds.
Better chances.
Better odds.
Yeah.
Better chances.
So we do it twice, and we don't produce any viable embryos.
Yeah.
Wow.
So... the doctor decided, she had narrowed down, we're going to go back to this first way, because this way you produce more. And mind you, I'm having to go under anesthesia for all these processes of them retrieving them. So it's I'm not working that day and then the day after, because, I'm under...
To recoup.
Right, exactly. And again, I'm having hormones being pumped through my body. So obviously that takes a toll emotionally. Mm-hmm. And then all while this is going on, I think we're counting on the way here, 7 people in our lives between us starting that process, the IVF process, or the process from moving here, all the way up until us finally getting pregnant. 7 people in our life got pregnant and had babies. And that was probably more than it ever happened in our entire life. I'm so it was definitely sure, of course, I'm okay, really, another one, that type of mindset.
You're probably feeling that Hannah moment.
She was.
Everybody's having kids. I'm not having kids.
And it was,
Lord, what's going
it was
on?
still, it was more of it's going to sound selfish, but I feel bad for me. I'm why is this happening for everybody else? They don't have to go through all this stuff.
Yeah.
They're not having to go through this process.
Yeah. You can interject.
I was just going to say, but that was the time that I met you, because you came and you opened up with me, and I had a heart for you, and I knew you were going to have a baby, and I told Jay, so we were avidly praying, and I know the feeling of, and I think I shared that with you, that you have a promise and everyone else is getting everything's going on around you and nothing's happening for you. And then in God's right time, he did it. And look, you've got a beautiful, I'm spoiler alert. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
beautiful baby.
It was definitely, that was the part that was hard. Because it's and I knew that people were being not everybody knew we were going through this, but they knew that we were kind of having, struggling. So I think people were very hesitant to tell us,
Or to just bring it up.
Right, or hey, we're having a baby, and then, all these people in our lives are having, at this point, his family pretty much knew.
Well, my brothers were having, when Matt had his second and Mark was having his first, and they found out, they actually kind of were very hesitant to tell me.
Yeah.
I think they both told me, but then my dad called me later and was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got another niece or nephew coming. I'm excited. I'm not upset somebody else is having a kid. My faith is still in Jesus, and that's where my faith is. And I want everyone to have kids, especially I love being an uncle. It's really fun, and so people definitely were tiptoeing around us when it came to that, and so I think Alicia definitely struggled more with that. I think just being a woman, that's more emotional, I think, maybe than being a man. Even though I am an emotional person, I think I was able to a little bit more compartmentalize that aspect and just be I'm hanging on. I know God's going to do it. Obviously I wish he did it earlier. Because it's 10 years. I think I said this when I was, teaching at church, like that's like a biblical amount of time, like 10 years.
Yeah.
We don't live as long as they did in the ancient world.
We don't necessarily have like that full 10 years that we really want to,
I'm like, man, when Aiden is born, I'm 41 years old.
But there's Abraham and Sarah, honestly, you think about their testimony, what their account was, and it's like, it said her womb was dead.
Yeah.
And
like
Sarah,
these
Hannah, Elizabeth.
And all these things are being taught in church around all this time. So I'm just like, it's like, I'm trying to take that part, obviously I know it's not about me. Mm-hmm. I know God was speaking to me, but I knew it wasn't that wasn't specifically, God calling me out type thing. Not everybody knew that's what I was going through. Even people here who didn't know I was going through things were praying for me, praying for my stomach and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I know, I was aware, I knew that God was there, and I think that's why it's hard for me to imagine someone who doesn't believe in God to go through that same process, because it really we lucked out because. It took us 3 times to get the proper amount of embryos and all that stuff to the right age and all that stuff. And mind you, I'm having to give, actually, I was having new injections 3 times a day, but Scott was also, so it's the whole physical aspect of it was exhausting, physically exhausting on me. Mm-hmm. But the percentage of the embryos taking for the first time was 60% that it would take and 40% it would not, right? So I was like, well, that's not great odds. It's better than, nothing, but still not great. And the odds of it really happening on the first time were extremely slim, especially at someone who was my age.
It was 20% or something like that.
Yeah, it was even lower, because that's that 60% is for
just creating
childbearing, age for younger women. That wasn't because technically I was a mature, immature age.
Geriatric. Pregnancy.
Yeah, the way they explain it, I'm like, thanks. But so I'm like, okay, I was like, okay, God had promised us this. So I'm like, that's still always in the back of my mind going through this process. But it was hard. I'm not going to say it wasn't hard, physically with all that stuff. But I feel like my body handled it better than I thought it was going to. So I thought it was going to be, yes, it was exhausting. I got tired of giving myself injections and. But we go in, and this is January, right? It was early January. We did the first embryo, the transfer. So basically that's when they put everything together. Mm-hmm. And then we go in, and it's really weird because when we're sitting in this office, you walk in, and they have a monitor, and it has a picture of the embryo that they're going to use, because they asked us do you really care? Because once the embryo gets to a certain age, you can actually find out whether it's a girl or boy, which I thought was kind of insane to think after 8 days. I thought that was a little weird. Ours never made it to 8 days, but it's just a weird whole feeling going in, okay, well, this is it, I do this is what all the injections are leading up to. And so I go and I sit down a table, and they have the picture. I'm like, okay, and so I lay there and they do everything. And I have to sit there for 20 minutes or something just to, kind of relax and as much as I can in the situation. And then we go home and I'm like, okay. It's weird. It's a weird feeling.
You can see Aiden at 8 cells big.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a crazy thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. We actually have the picture of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
It's insane. It's really insane to
not 8 weeks, 8 cells.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's how crazy.
Yeah.
So that transfer happened. And then a couple of days later we had a situation where we had to put one of our pets down. And that was really hard because it was one of my, not my favorite, but he liked me the most, one of our cats. So we had to put him down 2 or 3 days after the fact. Mm-hmm. But you have to wait, when they do the transfer, you have to wait 10 days before you could, like, you're supposed to do any testing, any, like, you know, pregnancy testing, because they want the embryo to make sure it takes, right? And so even if you took like a pregnancy test 7 days in, it could still come back negative.
So basically, they had to wait for it to attach to the uterine wall.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the body kind of like,
Gotcha.
you know. So I remember, it's funny because I remember the day I'm like, okay, well, this is it. Like, this is day 10. You know, obviously with the emotions of having to put one of our pets down, there's a lot of emotions going on, like those like 2 like weeks basically.
And she fell down the stairs like 2 days after
my
the transfer.
gosh.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
First thought was like, okay, are you okay? Second thought was like, we just probably lost the transfer.
Right. That's kind of, I mean, honestly, that was a huge fear. Because I was like,
Yeah.
I may have just like, you know, just because I slipped and missed a stair, you know. Luckily, it wasn't like the full thing of stairs, but it was enough to where
Still, you don't
I mean,
want to
it's
jolt
not. It was
the
not.
womb.
Yeah. And so like, I remember I was hanging out with my mom. We went to go to breakfast, and I'm driving home from hanging out with my mom. Excuse me, and it's like it's an hour drive, right? So I'm like, I have nothing on my mind because I had to go get a blood test done. Right in the hospital is right there, so I got a blood test done to confirm, you know, whether it took or not. Just hanging out with my mom, waiting for the results to come back, and I'm driving home, and the doctor called me, and I'm literally driving, which is probably not the best way to find out. But I'm driving, I'm like, she's like, you know, the embryo took, you know, she's like, congratulations, like, you're pregnant. And I'm like, what? Like, it was how everything had played out the 2 weeks or the week and a half before. Like, I was thinking very negatively because just of how everything we just dealt with our pet, and, you know, the stairs and everything was kind of like, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it was just not the answer I wasn't expecting. And
It was not the perfect time to tell you.
Yeah, it was, and I'm like crying while I'm driving home because I'm like, holy cow, like, this is for real now. And then I call Scott, and I'm pretty sure you're like, were you like a Home Depot or something like that?
Oh,
you
no.
you were somewhere.
I was with Joe. We were looking at countertops at a granite warehouse.
But I mean, he's my first phone call. For obvious reasons. I don't know, like, I couldn't tell how he responded. Obviously, I knew he was happy, but I couldn't tell how he responded on the phone.
It's just a surreal experience, you know, because when you're waiting 10 years, you know, it's not like, oh, it's, you know, we've been trying for 6 months, you're
10
pregnant.
years and 10 days.
Yeah.
Just to get
I mean,
confirmation.
Yeah, I mean, the 10 days is a long time to wait, too, you know. But
the longest 10 days of my life, it seemed like.
So, you know, it's like, wow, it's actually finally happening after that long of a wait. Very, very just surreal experience. And then it's a long 10 months of, you know.
I was going to ask you, during the pregnancy, was that like weighing on y'all, wondering if anything was going to go wrong? Or
For me. I don't know if it was for you as much, but like...
I mean, in any pregnancy, you're not...
Regardless
you don't tell the whole world in that first trimester.
Right.
You know, but there was a lot of people who knew we were going through this process, and so we kind of knew... So we had an inner circle that knew she was pregnant before we told the whole world, you know. So we told our parents and stuff, you know, because obviously they know we're going through the procedures. They're going to want to know. But yeah, I mean, you're still at the back of your mind, like, it's
if every doctor's appointment, you're still like
holding your breath,
you know, like you're, it's just, it's that. And even if it wasn't like IVF, it's normal for any pregnancy to be like paranoid, you know, that something's going to happen, you know. Luckily, my job was super great with, like, during this whole process, my direct supervisor knew what was going on, because I'd have to take time off of work more than I like, because I don't like taking time off work, but, you know, I kind of had to. So my whole, like, my work, my supervisors were all, like, super great with it. So I called Scott, then I called my mom, actually, and then I called my direct supervisor, because with my job, it's a very physical job. And so they told me to take it easy, basically. And so at that point on, and, you know,
can't be around x-rays.
I work in a vet hospital, so I can't take x-rays. I can't, you know, do any of that stuff. You know, I had to be, like, really far away from all that stuff. So, I mean, my job, because I had to, like, there's only one reason why a person cannot take x-rays at a vet hospital, and it's because they're pregnant. That's the only reason. So the second I say that to everyone's going to know, you know. So I was like, I mean, it is what it is. Obviously, they never really said anything to anybody outside of work.
Yeah.
But keeping that, like, quiet for that long was really, it was definitely hard because you're excited, but like you said, like, you're also kind of like,
You're
you know,
reserved
because you're like, you know, anything can still happen right now. It's still super early. I mean, even honestly, even up until the third trimester, because that's, you know, when they're viable outside, you know.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did the anxiety, fear of a miscarriage, did that lessen as the time went on? Like, okay, we made it to the fourth month.
A little bit, yeah, because I'm like, okay. It kind of was a little more of a relief, even though we knew it would be hard once you hit that third trimester. You're like, okay, if something were to happen, you know,
it's possible they could survive.
It's possible for them to survive outside. But it's still like, I kind of make the joke that my biggest fear with having a baby is giving birth. I don't like pain. So that was also kind of like an underlying thing. I'm like, the closer we got to like it being okay, I was like, the closer we're getting to me having to give birth, I'm like, I don't want to do that part, you know. Like that part scared me because I just don't like. I'm not a huge fan of pain. But honestly, like during the whole process of being pregnant, it was a fairly easy pregnancy. You know, as far as like
compared to what people told you,
right? Because I actually had a couple other coworkers I literally had another coworker who found out the same day I found out that I was pregnant. She found out she was pregnant. And like 2 other after that, so all within like, I don't know, a couple of months, like 4 of us all were pregnant at the same time.
Wow.
So it was definitely like, it's kind of cool to have like people there kind of going through the same process as you. But I mean, again, like I mentioned before, we're huge research people. So I'm doing all this research about everything, right? Like, you know, what to think about, what do I need for my like that, like everything.
Is that like your mom?
No.
Your mom does research?
She's very spontaneous.
Really?
Yeah. We're both planners. So I'm like, that's the other thing. It's like, I'm a plan, I like, you know, plans.
Yeah.
There's no planning this, you know? So when, I mean, I was like due at the beginning of October. I gave birth a week and a half before I was supposed to, which I'm fine with because I mean, earlier, I don't know. I'd rather not be late.
Yeah.
And I know that's like super common, but it was definitely like I was still like, even when that was happening, I was still not mentally prepared for that. But the whole process of even just that part of it was just, I mean, it was painful. Don't get me wrong, but it went pretty seamless. By the time between when my water broke to when I gave birth was exactly like 12 hours on the dot. So I'm like, I could have asked for a better, like, a birth, you know. I mean, everything compared to all the complications that are I had heard people having. I can't complain. You know, even though it was a long time waiting for that, it definitely like it was not as difficult as I had made it up in my mind it was going to be.
Did you cut the umbilical cord?
I did.
You did?
I didn't want to for the longest time, but Brian Kelly at church, because he works in labor and delivery.
Oh, he does?
He does, yeah. So him and Shannon.
Was he part of the
No, he
delivery?
wasn't.
No. Oh,
but
okay.
when we were, hanging out with him and Shannon, Brian's like, Scott, cut the cord. Just do it.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever did for any of my 3 kids.
Yeah.
I don't think
I didn't watch Aiden come out. I didn't want to watch that part.
No.
I stayed up, and I held her hand and did that part. But I did cut the cord. I have like a brief memory of that because it's obviously, it's a blur.
It's like a whirlwind of like everything. Yeah, because I mean, my doctor came in. She's like, okay, it's time to start pushing. I was like, what? That was a lot faster than I was expecting that to be. But yeah, I mean, everything went great. I mean, a couple days later.
Healthy and
he's nice.
What was the feeling? Exhilaration, relief?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of relief.
A lot
of like, I feel like purpose has really just been given to us. Because 13 years of marriage, there's purpose in marriage and purpose in church and careers and stuff, but
it's a different dimension of purpose.
When you want to have a family, you have that desire. Now that he's finally here, now it's like this rejuvenation, hits you of like, okay, now I feel connected to her more because of it, because now we're raising a child together, and we have this little human that we have to take care of and share this responsibility with. And all of as any parent would know, that everything now revolves around him, on sleeping and eating,
lack thereof, sleep,
diapers and getting him ready for church, and
it's a whole thing.
Everything is now, he is obviously Jesus is the center of our life, right? But in our nuclear family, he's now.
But in a natural way, you can't conduct life without paying attention to him, because he can't do anything on his own.
He's now the focal of everything, because
he's
one of us has to know what's going on with him at all times, right? So now it's such just this bigger purpose in life now. There's such a cool feeling. I think being an older dad maybe makes me appreciate that a little bit more than if and I'm not degrading anybody who had kids earlier, right? But somebody who has a kid maybe in their early to mid 20s, you're still young yourself, and things move so much faster in your 20s. Now that I'm about to be 42, I feel like I can slow my life down enough. Last night when he's up at 2:30 in the morning, he's been sleeping through the night. Of course, on my shift, he gets up at 2:30 in the morning, and I'm watching him on the monitor, and he's just making all of his noises and talking, and and I'm like, son, go to sleep. You shouldn't be like doing this. But then I go in there and I pick him up, and he's still just talking away. And I'm just like, man, I love you so much. Like, this is such a great moment. Still go to sleep, but I'm just slowing my life down and just soaking in everything that he has to offer, and I don't want to miss any moment of that.
I'm not sure it's so much a matter of your age. I think it's a matter that you waited 13 years. Anybody that waits 13 years for a child, you could have been 30 by the time you finally got a child. It's the 13 years. It's that whole process, that whole trying. And you kept, and both of you said, the Lord said, we're going to have a baby. Was that through the prophetic words of them laying hands on you? Is that what you guys were holding on to?
Yeah, it was multiple people who didn't really know the situation that we were going through. Even before we knew we were going to have issues. Even before. The joke was kind of like when we first got married, she spoke over, the pastor's wife, this couple that visited, she spoke over us and made a comment about, are you guys wanting to have kids? And everybody who knew us at that time knew I was not about that yet.
He comes.
I was not about that yet. So people chuckled when she said that, but then.
Well, earlier you said when you were talking about this a little while ago, you said you thought it was going to be like 2 or 3 month delay.
It's okay.
But
sorry, what was that again?
No. When you first started sharing the story, you thought it was going to only be a 2 or 3 month delay. What was it? 13 years in total.
10 years of us actively let's start now. But 13 years of marriage.
So the guest of honor has come. I don't know if you heard him or caught him, but we just brought him in. I don't know if he'll speak or say anything before we close out.
Yeah, he does it. He just 3 hours.
He was sleeping.
He didn't have a good. He didn't have a good consistent nap, so that's not surprising.
But you got to share your whole testimony, and I'm really, really glad to have heard it in its fullness. Do you have anything you'd like to kind of emphasize or share with anyone? And it's like a parting message of, based on everything you've gone through that you want to share?
The only thing that was kind of coming to my mind as towards the end here was we talk about in church, when God heals you, when it's really healing from God, you don't remember what the pain feels like. And that's how I feel with him here with us now. It's like he's about to be 5 months old. He's only been with us 5 months, outside of the womb, obviously. And but I feel like he's been with us forever. And I don't remember what the pain feels like anymore. I don't remember what it feels like to go through the struggle and the doubt and the questioning and the tears. It's like I don't, like, I know I went through it, but I don't remember what it feels like. And that's how I know that God was in the situation, that in a sense God healed us of that. I mean, it's not a physical healing, but it's still a healing of emotional healing for us. So he emotionally healed us, you know, by providing a baby for us. And that's what God does. He heals you, and he erases the pain from the past in the same process. And he's amazing.
Amen. You have anything?
I mean, just, you know, I mean, God's faithful. That's kind of his word is. Whenever that's the thing, is like, we can always go back to that. Even before this, just seeing his faithfulness and just our life and our family's life, like my mom's life and all that stuff, like how God, he's healer. He's always kept to his word. He's always been faithful through the whole process, and it's just kind of holding on to that, even when it was really difficult. You know. Just holding on to, like, well, he did it before. Yeah. You know, so he can do it again. You know.
That's right.
It's corny, but you know.
Well, with our little guest here, I'm going to close out this podcast, and I hope that it blesses some of you or all of you. Different parts. There's so many different lessons, life lessons that can be learned as we listen to this testimony. And you know, that Joseph thing keeps coming to my mind, but I started off this podcast not realizing how much this was going to be attached to this scripture. But you said something about that healing and how you kind of don't remember the pain, the struggle, and all that stuff. And I think that's true, so that you can move on and move forward. But I remember this scripture. He comforts us in all of our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort that which we ourselves are comforted by God. So I think when you need to minister to someone else, you're going to remember. It's not going to hurt. Yeah. You're going to remember more in detail, so that you can really minister and then really help bring someone up and give them hope, knowing that God is going to be faithful. So I appreciate you spending the evening with us. Yes. We loved having you. We love sharing you with the world. And we just love all of you that are faithful here listening to our Father's Heart podcast. If you haven't already, please like or subscribe to us. We'd love to have you share it with others. If you can do anything, we're not asking for your money. We're not asking for this or that. If you could just share the podcast with others so that they can be blessed just as much as you were, we would really appreciate it very much. Love you all, and we'll see you again soon.
If you were blessed and appreciate listening to this podcast, and you would like to support us in our efforts, consider lifting us up in prayer first. Then remember these 4 social media buzzwords: share, like, subscribe, or follow. Share this podcast link with someone else by text, email, or word of mouth in the hopes that they might be uplifted as you were. Like by leaving a positive rating or review with whomever you listen to our podcast with. Subscribe to support the show monetarily with the link in our podcast description. Follow us on all our social media platforms. May God bless you and make you prosperous in Him as you listen and obey His voice.